Hello, and welcome to the Music Teacher Coffee Talk podcast. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Tanya. We are both elementary music teachers who love to talk shop, preferably over a steaming cup of coffee. This is episode 163. Today we are talking with David Rao about creativity in the Orff classroom. We'll also talk about our highs and lows from the teaching week, discuss some ideas in our Know Better, Do Better segment, share a work smarter, not harder teacher tip.
And in our CODA section, we'll give some specific recommendations of our favorite things we are enjoying in and out of the music room. So grab your beverage of choice and let's get started.
We are so happy to have David Rao with us today. David is a Nebraska native and Midwesterner at heart. David Rao lives and teaches in the Kansas City metro area. He holds a master's degree from the University of Missouri, Kansas City Conservatory. He is an Orff Schulwerk Level 1 teacher educator and has extensive experience with critical thinking in the arts.
David is an AOSA approved Orff Schulwerk teacher, educator, and teaches level 1 pedagogy each summer in Orlando and St. Louis. On his blog, makemomentsmatter.org, and through his podcast, David shares ideas about classroom content management, lesson plans, critical thinking, and more. Catch up with David every week on his Musical Mondays live videos on Facebook and Instagram. And now we welcome David Rao. So we are so excited to have David Rao with us today. Welcome, David.
Hi, I'm excited to be here.
Thanks. So we're going to start with some highs and lows where we each share something that's happened in our last teaching week or so. The good, the bad, the ugly, the in between. So what would you like to share with us today, David?
Okay, well, I'm just going to bring us right down to start.
Woohoo!
I have a low this week. It's not really a low. I just had a day where I got to the end of the day and like nothing had gone wrong. It was just a day where it was like teacher fatigue. Like so many things happened. I had three back-to-back classes in the afternoon, and kindergarten in the first quarter is always hard. So I felt like I was on, I had to like be on to be present, to be with the kindergartners. And then during kindergarten, then we had two kids walk in with birthday treats. And then there was like technology didn't work. And then there was an announcement that we had to stop. It was like just between these three class. Oh, and I had someone observing me. So it was like thing after thing after thing. And it was just like by the end of the day, I was so tired. And in one of the activities, the kabasa had come apart. And then like, I turned around at the end of the day and I was like, I have like 10 minutes of just putting stuff away. So it was one of those moments where I was like, nothing really was bad, but it was just like exhausting. And I feel like we don't always talk about that and like, are honest about that. So it was just like a day where I was like, yeah, this is just really tired. You make so many decisions and you do so much. So it was good to like go home and like I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna rest, have some candy corn. It'll be better tomorrow. I just need to know that in perspective, yes, it's okay to be tired.
This is the time of year. I hear you because I resonate with that being on, especially for kindergarten. Like I feel like I cannot let my guard down. I gotta just, it's just got to keep up the pacing. Got to be aware of what's happening. Got to be aware of the bathroom peeing epidemic and like, has
Yes,
it caught on
yes.
yet today? They're so influenced by, oh no, one has to pee and everybody has to, and it's like roulette with that, you know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like that with my third graders, which brings me to my story. So we have a really interesting third grade class with lots of big personalities, and there's one kiddo in particular who, like, his first day of music this year, he spent 75% of music class under the calming corner desk, and then the next time, and then I had a little restorative conversation with him after class that day, which it just so happens he has his recess time right after music. So it's like, cool, we'll have a very brief restorative conversation, like less than a minute, but enough to like feel the pain a little bit of like, seriously, we need to talk about this. And if you miss some recess time, that's the way it's going to go. So that worked out in my favor. And then the next time he came to music, it was like sometime under the calming corner desk. And the thing is, when he goes under the calming corner desk, he's not just chilling, he's yelling out and shouting and not throwing things at us, but throwing things in general. And like, it's been rough. But my high is in my last, I do 3 day rotations with my kids. And so in my last 3 day rotation, he participated 99% of the time in all 3 days. And I was so excited. I think he's just kind of had a come around moment with me and with school in general. And so I celebrated him and I emailed his dad. And then it just so happened the same day he had his best day in music because we had earned a game choice day. And I spun the wheel of names. It landed on him, which I was thrilled about. He got to pick a game. Then we played a flashcardy, relay racy kind of game that he won. He won the game. So then he was so thrilled. And then he went out to recess and something awesome happened there. And then it was pizza day. So it was like all of his favorite things. And so at the end of the day, I guess with one of the sped teachers, he was celebrating his day and music was a part of that. And it was just one of those things where, like, kind of the opposite of your story, David, where all the stars aligned and everything went right, which I was only a small piece to that puzzle, but it feels really good when that happens, right? So I've had days like yours where everything feels like it's just not in sync, going well, and then days like this where things just do go well, and I feel like I had a small part to play in it. But yeah, it was a celebration for that kid and for me.
Yay. That's great.
How
I'm going to
about
go
you,
low.
Tanya?
Well, I'm going to go low just because a funky thing happened yesterday, and I don't think I dealt with it like I should have. I don't know. Anyway, I was reading to kindergartners Cockadoodle Moo. Are you familiar with Cockadoodle Moo? With the rooster, and he's trying to wake up the farm, but when he goes to make his cockadoodle doo, it comes out as a whisper. He's lost his voice. So this is a continuing exploration of our talking voice, whisper voice, calling voice, singing voice, all of that. And the rooster wakes up a cow to help him since he's lost his voice. And he tries to teach the cow to say cockadoodle doo, but the cow does some, very funny cockadoodle, rockadoodle poo, or whatever. And then the best the cow can do is cockadoodle moo. And so together they wake up all the animals on the farm, and everybody wakes up with a laugh because they hear cockadoodle moo. And I've read this story many times to many children. And I was reading it to kindergarten, and one of the little kids was like, "They're laughing at the cow. That's not nice." And because the whole thing is everyone wakes up a laugh, and they love waking up with a laugh. And now the cow and the rooster wake up everyone together, and they both say cockadoodle moo. And yeah, and then the other kindergartners like, "Yeah, we're not supposed to laugh at each other. You told us that we'll never laugh at anyone's honest effort." Like this whole thing about the kindergartners riling against this idea of the book. And I don't know, I just kept reading the book, and I was like, well, the cow's laughing too. Everyone is laughing. And I don't know. It's just a new problem. It's great that families and younger kids, I guess the next generation, are very empathetic. But I guess I just never looked at the book this way. It's not a mean spirited, down with cows trying to wake up the farm kind of book. But it was weird. Yeah. And I don't know. I just didn't really address, I kind of brushed it off like, well, everyone's laughing, everyone's having a good time. Everyone wants to say cockadoodle moo. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should have had a longer conversation about it. I don't know. So that was just kind of
It's
strange.
it's hard with kindergarten to be like, well, yes, but let's talk about nuance. And in this instance, they're not like making fun of the cow. It's like his spin on, like it's hard
Yeah.
to have that conversation with kids who don't understand. It is so black and white for them. And so it's hard to be
Yeah.
like, well, but contextually,
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
Yeah.
How
So,
do you say that with kindergarten?
yes, yes. And, it didn't last for too long because, of course, somebody had to go to the bathroom, I'm sure, is what happened. But yeah, it's just a new problem, a new thing. And I don't know. I'm supposed to I have it in my plans to keep reading this book. I'm curious to see what happens with the rest of the kindergarten classes this next week. And it's time for our main theme, a conversation with David Rao, all about creativity in the Orff music classroom.
So, we'd like to start with the big question. What role does improvisation play in your Orff classroom, and how do you encourage students to improvise?
Well, improvisation plays a ginormous role in the classroom. The basis of Orff work is all um, improvising and imitating and exploring. Like that is the focus of Orff work, I think. And now that I've taught Orff Level 1 a couple years, the more I delve into it, the more I think that, Orff is all about taking ideas and running with them. Um, to the point where, like, the Orff volumes, like those yellow books that a lot of people use if you've gone to trainings, all these examples from Orff and Catemon and the original school years and years ago, they almost didn't publish those because they didn't want people to think this is the way you should do, this is the verbatim thing. And so they said these are like examples. If you're going to use these, you should change them, you should adapt them, you should do whatever. And so I always think it's kind of funny if you go to a conference and you hear something played exactly as written in the book, that's like not in the spirit of Orff Schulberg, because it should be adapted and changed and improvised. So improvisation is like the basis for everything we do. So for me, I think when I first started as a music teacher, I was really intimidated teaching improvisation because I thought like it has to have a certain structure, or it needs to be like on an instrument, or it needs to, I had all these ideas of what improvisation was because of like high school jazz band, or like, thoughts about what improvisation should be. And the more I teach, the more that I find that improvisation is just like 1,000 small lessons on the way to giving a kid an instrument and saying like, here's your pitch set and let's, create a melody. It's so many tiny little choices, giving kids opportunities, giving kids decision making, all these little things along the way that build up, so that when they're given an instrument, they're given a moment to say like, now you have 8 beats or whatever to create, that it's just natural because they don't think of it as improvisation. They think, oh, this is an extension of what we've been doing since we came in the classroom. So improvisation is like in every lesson in a variety of ways, but I don't always like label it as improvisation. It's just like, okay, now where else could you put the steady beat? We put it on our knees. Where are you going to put it next? You're giving kids choices, and that builds into a culture of I get to choose here, or I get options. I have options and I'm a creator. So improvisation, it is large form, but it's also just all these small steps along the way.
I love how that gives so much ownership to the what the kids are doing in your classroom, and I'm sure that there's just so much buy-in and so much like, wow, this is not just about me doing music, but me putting myself into it. And that's such a great byproduct of the improvisation that you are doing. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun how like improvisation and like classroom culture kind of go hand in hand, because you're creating this culture of this is a safe place where you can create and try anything, and it may work or it may not work, but like this is the place where you get to explore and try things. It feels kind of like an art studio. Like my art teacher has this same idea of like, sure, try it and we'll see, so it's cool to have that, like that classroom culture of, yes, this is a place where you get to make choices and explore, and that just also happens to align with my objectives for what we're doing in class.
That is awesome. Well, which brings us to I listen and watch your videos on Mondays often, and I know you've got a lot of structure within your lessons. And how do you balance that structure with that open-ended creative exploration within your classroom?
Sure. So okay, so this is sort of a side topic, but if you don't know Orff Schulwerk, like if you've never done training and you just have like seen a workshop or seen an Orff inspired person, I feel like the idea is that like Orff people are like, let's kick off our shoes and we're all going to turn into trees. Okay, let's be tree. It's like this like big like hippy dippy sort of, I don't know, like we're free. And like,
Yep.
yes, it can be that. But there are like, I know so many type A Orff Schulberg teachers. Like, I know so many people who are so structured. Like, our current executive director, Tiffany English, is one of the most structured and thought out people that I know. And so, if you talk with her about sequence and scaffolding and structure, like, that is the basis for everything she does. So I would love to dispel the rumor that to be an Orff person you must be like type B and free and do like sure do whatever. Like no, there's a lot of structures. So I think that balancing it is figuring out where are the places where you can scaffold in choices for kids. And for me, a lot of that comes in let's add a B section. So there's this, 8-bar song, or there's this thing that we're doing. How can we add something new? So like engine number 9. I'm doing that with my kindergartners right now. So engine number 9 is not a very long poem, and I remember when I was teaching that I was like, how do I make this like a longer activity? So I just added a B section where we did like train sounds and we moved like a train, and we and you can do that with any song or game. You can add a B section, and for me a lot of times that becomes improvisation. So what can we add in here? Let's echo. Let's try call and response. Let's do question and answer with a partner. And so it's just little places where you can take the things that you're already teaching and just inject a moment for student choice. And sometimes that's like a B section, and sometimes that's okay, you learned it this way, now you get a creative variation. So like my fifth graders just did Four White Horses, which has a hand clapping game. It's a really fun hand clapping game. I teach them the like traditional hand clapping game, a simple version, a trickier version. And then I say, okay, now you're going to have 10 minutes, and in your small group, you get to come up with your own hand clapping game. And here are the rules and whatever, and here's the structure for it. And it's not just like free for all, like it has to match the song. Everyone needs to be involved somehow. You all have to be able to do it. So if someone's like, let's start with a backflip, you can't do that because not everyone's gonna be able to do that. So like everyone there's rules about it. There's structure to it. So it's just giving kids those little choices in and out wherever you want that build up to giving them this feeling of yeah, I'm creating, I'm trying, and I'm involved in some way. So it's not always like pull out the instruments or let's take a half hour and do this thing. Sometimes it's like hey, we got 5 minutes. Let's what's a new action you could do? What's another place you could try that? As simple as like with my kindergartners, like we're keeping the steady beat. Where else can you keep the steady beat? Ooh, on the floor. Great. On your elbows. Cool. Can you keep it while nodding your head? Yes, you can. Okay, let's try it. So it's giving them lots of choices in little ways, and then letting that meld in with all of the structured things that you're already doing in other places.
I love that idea of taking a folk song or a chant or whatever. That speaks very much to us Kodai inspired people, right? Because so much of our repertoire is, folk songs and structured things, but then taking it and doing something else with it. I think that speaks very well to our brains as well. So I'm glad you mentioned that example.
And that's a good
Yeah,
reminder because those are simple things that, you know, whether you're Kodai inspired or Orphan inspired, that's you can weave those things, those choices, those creativity, those B sections in with what you're doing. And I have to remind myself as someone who has been to a lot of sessions and workshops, but I have not had formal training in anything Orff. Um, it's really a good refresh in my classroom to bring in just the small opportunities for kids to be creative. So, good reminder.
there's an example you were talking. I was thinking the song Dippy Doo. I don't know if you know that song.
Yes.
Good day to you. Good day, oh Dippy Doo. It's a fun song because there's an A and B, and the A is in 3 and the B is in 2. So to have sort of a mixed meter feeling. But with my kids, ultimately, I want them to be able to do pat, clap, snap, pat, clap for the A section. Good day to you. Like ultimately, that's what I want them to get to. But first, I start by saying, I'm just going to sing the song, keep the steady beat anywhere on your body. Okay, find a new place, keep the steady beat somewhere else on your body. A third place. And so maybe they do on their tummy, maybe they do on their shoulders, maybe they do on their toes, whatever. And then I say, okay, can you link those together? toes, tummy, shoulders, toes, try a different set of three. And so it's just like they're exploring and trying, and I ultimately have a plan for where we're going, but I'm letting them feel like, yeah, let's try these different ways so that when we then get to the part where I'm like, okay, now let's try this one. Knees, clap, snap. They're ready, but they've had like, 2 minutes, not really, but like 2 minutes ish where they're getting free choice. And then they feel like, oh yeah, I made this option, and maybe we'll try. Yeah, let's try Hazel's. Okay, let's try, Jaden's or whatever, and we try their option. And then ultimately, we'll get to the one that I'm getting to, but that I know I want to get to. But we're trying their things along the way, so it doesn't have to be formalized or recorded or whatever. But it's just like a moment where they're getting that option.
That's awesome. You mentioned when you're talking about Four White Horses, that was a group activity where they came up with something. So I'd love to hear more about how you foster collaboration and group creativity, where students are working either in a partner or small group rather than their own individual choices.
So I think kids are not good at group work, like as much as I wish they were. And even it's so funny, like my fifth graders, I would think like after 6 years and all the things that we're doing in STEM and art and music and in their homeroom and like all this working together, you'd think by now they would be good at working with other people, but I feel like they just maybe aren't for some reason. So that's not necessarily a music teaching strategy thing. It's just like a kid strategy thing of like how do you get them to work in groups. So for me, when I give them an assignment like the Four White Horses thing, where they have to come up with a new clapping pattern, I give them guidelines for what they have to do. So everyone has to be involved in some way. In Four White Horses, that might mean that some people are doing like clap, pat, and some people are doing stomp, turn. I don't know. But your group has to decide what you're going to do. It doesn't all have to be the exact same thing, but everyone has to be involved somehow, which is cool because then the kid who's like, I don't want to do the jumping whatever thing. Okay, find your own way to connect in there. But you give them those guidelines of like everyone needs to be involved. If someone gives an option, you need to try it first. Don't downplay it and be like, no, we're not. You try it first, and then if you like it, cool. Add it to your list of options. If not, move on. But everyone's voice should be heard. Everyone should be involved, and then the end. You need to have an end product. So I keep saying like, okay, in 5 minutes you need to be ready to move on. In 3 minutes you need to be ready to move on. So it's partially like giving them structure for the work, and then as they're going, checking in and reminding them of, yes, there's a deadline coming. Because I feel like for some kids, if they don't have that sense of like, ooh, the countdown, that they will just spiral. But if they know that like you need to have a response or something ready in 2 minutes, then the group dynamic sort of pushes them forward to get things finished. But there are a lot of kids that they just need more structure, and so it's not just open to do whatever. It's here are the things that you need to accomplish in this time.
Hey, as a brief follow up, and you can say you can not answer if you want. What do you think is a good number of kids in a group? I mean, I know it might depend, and I've got my own ideas, as I'm sure Carrie does too. But what do you think?
It depends on the song or the game or the whatever. Like Four White Horses is so great when you can have an even number. That doesn't always happen, but it would be so nice. Um, but when I'm putting kids in small groups, I usually do 3 to 5 kids ish. I feel like anything less than three is awkward. Like if you're just by your in groups of two, and it can get kind of awkward depending on what you're doing. If it's like a long amount of time creating, and if anything more than five can get kind of rowdy. Because if you get more than five, you start getting like subgroups in the group, and so I don't know. So it depends on what it is, but I usually do about 3 to 5, especially if there are instruments involved, and there's like sound making or exploring. I feel like less is kind of more because you have less to hear, but it kind of depends on what it is you're doing.
I totally agree. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, me
it's
too.
good stuff to think about. Yeah. Um, so you mentioned the instruments. How does using those barred instruments help unlock creativity in your students?
Yeah, totally. So I think one of the things that I had to initially get over when I became started taking Orff training and started, um, exploring Orff Schulberg, was I had to get over the idea that some kids don't like to sing. And I felt like it was always like a personal failing of mine when a kid wouldn't want to sing. And I just over time, like, yes, all kids can sing, all kids will sing many times, but there are some kids who, like, that's not their passion. They don't enjoy it. It's not their thing. They don't like the hand clapping game. They don't like the singing game, whatever. And so there are just some kids where if you give them a recorder, that becomes their life and their passion. Like, I had a kid who he moved in and he came with an IEP from a different school, and it said in like bold letters, like, does not like music, will not participate. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see. And so he came to music, didn't like it. We were doing folk dancing, didn't like it. We did some solfege, was not interested. We got to the recorder unit, and I was like, oh Lord, this is going to be a mess. And he took the recorder, and that became his lifeblood. It was his favorite thing. He only wanted to do that. And I was like, and then he started talking to me and saying, like, can I play this outside of school? Can I take it home? Can I try it? And I was like, sure. He's like, I love music. I was like, I would never have known until now. So I feel like I've had to train myself to think like all kids are different and people are excited by different things. And so for some kids it's recorder, and some it's barred percussion, some kids it's singing, some kids it's the moving, some kids it's the vibra slap. I don't know. Like, everybody's inspired by their thing. So that's one of the things I had to to reckon with myself personally, because I'm a singer first, and I grew up doing that. Is the thing, like, some kids just really love this. It really inspires them. So for me, it's the Orff instruments are great because they give a great scaffold. Um, so, like, when you're playing on recorder, you're improvising on recorder, I always give a pitch stack to the students. Like, we're going to play B, A, and G, and low E and low D. Those are the notes. You can explore any of them, play with any of them, but those are the five we're going to play with. Or if we're improvising in solfege, okay, we're going to do do, mi, so, la, or whatever. Giving them a framework of, like, these are the things you can improvise with. With the barred instruments, it's really easy because you can take off bars you don't want to play. And so frequently we'll set the bars up in a pentatonic scale, taking off the fourth and seventh scale degree, fa and ti, so that then you don't have dissonances. And when kids play around, everything feels kind of, you know, consonant. It feels like it goes together. So the Orff instruments, or the barred instruments, are great because they can give you that framework of, like, a literal physical, I can see it and explore right in front of me. I feel like singing, it's kind of hard. Like, I've always advocated for using hand signs with solfege because, you know, a clarinet can just put down their finger and play, and it's that note right away. Or, a pianist can just press down on keys. But for solfege, it's like this non-physical thing. And so using hand signs gives kids that physical, like, it helps them connect physically to the thing that's, like, ephemeral. So that's why I love using, like, barred instruments, because it is a physical thing where you can take off a bar, you can see, you can feel, you can replay, you can play patterns, whether you know it's the notes or not. You can say, like, oh, I'm going up and going down. So it's a really nice scaffold to get kids into exploring, that gives them an easy connection, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
I've
love how you.
always. Oh,
Oh,
go ahead,
go
Tanya.
ahead.
We
I
both
was
wanted, like,
say,
um, we're probably gonna say similar things. As Kodai inspired teachers and teacher trainers, I know I talk a lot in my classes about how vocal melodic improvisation is like the hardest thing to do, because yeah, it's like you said, you're not just hitting a bar, you're not just pushing down a note, you're using your voice, you're coming up with ideas off the top of your head. It's really hard. And then to expect them and ask them to sing those intervals correctly and accurately and tunefully, that's really hard. So giving them all these experiences on barred instruments in addition to vocal exploration and vocal improvisation is really cool. I wanted to ask a very nerdy follow-up question, if I may. So thinking about, like, kindergarten, first grade, I'm assuming that you kind of scaffold your melodic work with them, where you're singing like so mi and so mi la patterns and songs with them. But do you have them go ahead and improvise in the full pentatonic scale during those kind of B section improvisation activities, just to give them a richer tone set? Or do you typically stick with the solfege they know or have been introduced to in a more formalized way, and then expand your tone set as you go?
For me, I can't speak for all Orff people, but for me, when I'm doing like vocal improvisation, it usually sticks with the pitches and the intervals that we are like focusing on and working on, and then as we get to other things, we'll expand a little bit more. But like this week, my first graders, I sang, "What's your favorite color?" and they sang back with their favorite color, but they had to sing it back on the interval, or "What'd you have for lunch today?" And so it's taking the interval and adding in a new element they come up with. So it's like pre-improvisation, but it's just using the interval. So for that, for solfege, I generally stick to the intervals. But if we get to the barred instruments, I might do more, just because, like you said, it's easier to physically see and play it. So it kind of depends on where we're going with it or what the lesson dictates. But yeah, singing, I usually stick with the intervals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes so much sense on the instruments too, because my students, they're aware that there's not just three notes in the world. It's not just so mi la land forever. I mean, they see I've got hand signed tone ladders, on the walls. And I always come back to, well, yes, we know the other notes are there. We've just been more formally introduced to so mi and la. It's like, the neighbors on your block, that this Mr. Smith lives over here, but you might not have had a conversation with him. And so it makes sense that on the instruments, we can, take a brief visit to those other pitches because they're right there and we don't have to produce them with our voice. And it does make for that richer tonality. Because I often worry that one of the misconceptions in from of Kodai inspired teachers is that we're only singing so and me for a year and we're only singing so mi la for a year. It's just like when you read to small children, you read to them books that have words that they can't read and might not understand unless it's in context. Like that's so very important for them to gain their literacy, is that we're going above and beyond when we're hearing it. um, Same thing in music. We want to hear all these rich tonalities, melodies, rhythms, but we're formally meeting these ones developmentally in first grade.
I totally, absolutely understand that. I've also had people say, like, "Do you only do so me?" It's like, how many songs are there that are only so? No, no, we do a
Well, a
lot more.
lot, but
But
no.
yeah, there are a lot. Yeah, but I was like, I would be so bored if that was the only thing I was. So there's a lot that's involved. But yeah, when you're targeting like the interval or trying to get them to think specifically, like, yeah, and you're right, exactly. You read a ton of books to kindergartners, but then you also read certain things that are leveled readers, right? So like, I think it's the same thing, which is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
analogy. Okay, before we talk more about orphans, so since I have my xylophone here, because like,
Of
who doesn't
course.
have
You just pulled
a
that out of your
xylophone at
pocket, David.
home? Right?
David, I left mine. I'm sorry, it's in the bedroom. I don't have it to pull out.
What's really nerdy is this is not the only xylophone I have in my office right now, but I won't go into that. So, but when we're talking about like how do you like unlock creativity or like giving kids scaffolds, like so I take off fa and t, right? But then also when we're improvising or trying, I'll say like only use mi re do for right now, or only use so and la for right now, or we did mi re do, let's add so and la, and so like you start with one tiny little thing and then add another, or this is so silly, but one of my favorite beginning activities with younger kids is like, I'm going to say the rhythm and you play it, but only on do.
Oh.
So I'll do a bunch of those and then I'll say, now you can do do or re. Ooh. And so then it sounds terrible for a minute because the kids are like, there's like a major second for like, a whole minute of them like, but they're like so excited. It's like ta 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 ta, and they're all going at different times, and so it's like a second, ooh, gross. And so then I say, now add, me, and so then, but it's like moves up to like more melodic playing because they're just echoing my rhythm, but they're echoing it on whatever note they want. So, but it just builds up. So it's like you start with one tiny little thing and you add a little bit, you add a little bit, you add a little bit. So it's like what they can handle. But I would never start with like ta 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 di ta and let them go. Like they're never gonna do that. Like they
Yeah.
can't do that. So it's just like little things one at a time as you build up and build up. But like I said, the Orff instruments are cool because you can say like just this one bar, and that's so easy for them to play because it's physically right in front of them. You know, I mean, not for some kids, it's still kind of hard because hand-eye coordination, but it's like
Yes.
it's a fun step for them.
I love the scaffolding. That's just so important, and you do it so well. I have another offshoot geeky question of something that has always, I don't know, it feels scratchy about the Orff instruments to me because I have several, and now I'm at a school where I do have one for every kid, which is really exciting. Uh, let's talk about C major. Um, do It's so great on the instruments. However, if I'm having like half the kids on the instruments, half the kids singing, I don't love C major to sing in. How does that work for you? Do you change keys often, or what do you do?
Um, yeah, it depends on the song. You know, if it's an authentic melody where it's like do to do, or if it's what we call a plagal melody where it like dips below to low so, where it's like so to so. Um, it depends on that would change the key. So most often, or if people will use C, F, or G pentatonic. If we're talking like major-ish keys, but you could also do the law-based version of that. So um, it depends on the song. Um, C is easy because the instruments are in C, but if you're going to include a recorder, C is not necessarily the best key, so it kind of depends on what you're doing. To get to something, if you want to do D major, you just have to pull out accidentals
Yeah.
because me is going to be F sharp. So it I think it depends, and a lot of times I will, in one lesson I'll teach a song and do it in D major or E major or whatever, depending on what's best for the kid's vocal range. And then if on another day we take that song and put it on the instruments, I might move it down to C major because it's more instrumental work and less singing. So they like understand the melody and the framework, but we just do it in the different key because it works. It's easier for logistics. But I
Yeah.
think you can change it. It depends, and it's funny too because if you look at the Orff volumes, like Volume One is all pentatonic and all in C major, but I think the misunderstanding is like, don't most Kodai people do all of their folk song books all in one key? Am I
Yes. When we
understanding that
do a
right?
well, it actually these days, most people are in training programs where they are not required to, in their song collection, write out songs in any specific key. We write out everything in stick notation, and part of that is
Oh,
because it could be in any key.
got
And
it.
so I, a million years ago, I had to write my songs on a staff. And my level one teacher wanted everything in G major. And my level two and
Right.
three teacher wanted everything in D. And that was, I don't like looking through it, but if everything's in stick notation, then it doesn't. I mean, the takeaway is you put this where the kids' voices are. This is
Right.
just in solfege with your rhythm, and so it's not dictating a specific key. But for the most part, um, I do most of my, I mean, not all, but I live in F major, G major if we're so me line. Um, and then I bring in C major for anything instruments, mostly because I'm a little lazy. And even though I have all the Orff instruments, I've got like half of them on carts. And if I have doubled up kids two to an instrument, that works. But if I'm going to have kids one to an instrument, then I got to like open the cabinets and bring them all out. And I'm embarrassed to say that like sometimes I'm like, I don't have the time to get that set up in the 5 minutes between second grade and third grade. You know how it is. I mean,
Yeah. Well, the reason I brought up the folk song collection was I feel like many of my Kodai friends did have to do it in G or D, like all their songs,
mm,
knowing that you could change the key as needed. But like for the sake of notation, you did it all in one. And it's the same for Orff. Like they're all in C. You in the books. You can change that. It's just knowing the limitations of the instrument and only having certain accidentals because I don't want to have a complete like chromatic instrument. That'd be so many bars and it would be crazy. Okay, everyone, put on your C sharps and your D sharps and your F sharps and G sharps and like no. So we mostly live in F major, G major, sorry, F pentatonic, G pentatonic, or C pentatonic, just because it's easiest. But if you do F pentatonic, you can take off B. You don't have to worry about B flat. So that's an easy one if you're thinking a pentatonic scale. And same for G. G pentatonic's easy because there is no F sharp in G pentatonic. So if you want to live in F or G, that's a pretty easy addition to do. It's when you
Yeah,
get to something like D or E, you can't really do that.
I know. I
E
do a
would
lot
be
of
law based for G. But
I do a lot of DA bourdoons, just the bourdoon to
yeah,
accompany things, because
yeah,
that's a fine key to sing in.
Mm.
Well, we've already talked a little bit about the strategies you used to help students develop their own musical ideas and compositions, but let's like aim towards older kids when they're building like richer melodies, rhythms. What strategies would you use for kids who have been with you for a while to drive them towards their own, however long, compositions?
sure. Well, I like to talk with folks about the Orff process of like how do you teach a concept or a lesson. And I know the Kodai version is the fun like alliteration, the PPP, right? Prepare, present, practice. Did I get that right?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, cool.
you passed the test.
Okay, good. I studied. No, like I knew that one. Okay, so Orff is very similar, but the prepare stage is different for us. So we say imitate, explore, label, and create. So instead of preparing involves a lot of imitation, a lot of taking those imitations and changing, flipping, and trying ever before we label, before we present what that concept or idea is, and then we take that presented idea and then run with it when we create. So many of the things we do start with imitation, even at older grades, younger grades, older grades, is giving them ideas that they can watch and emulate or make variations on or explore different things. So it's all starts with lots of imitation and watching and seeing what else they could do, imitating me, imitating a kid, imitating an example. But that permeates all my grades. As far as like um, getting kids to develop their own musical ideas, I think it's the same as all other things in Orff Schulwerk, where it's like scaffold, 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 scaffold. Like start with one choice, add another choice, add another, make it small little things where they've already built on and understand, and then just add a little more. So, for an example, like maybe you have a song, you add a B section with a poem that you create, or maybe it's a part of the song or not, but like you take a song, you add a B section, they learn the poem, and then you say, let's take the poem and let's go put it on the instruments. So, using the rhythm of the poem, you improvise, given these 5 notes that you get to improvise whatever you want as long as it matches the rhythm of the poem. So then it's like they're not completely creating everything. There is still structure. They already know the poem, so it's then just taking the poem and making it melodic. And a lot of times I'll say like, okay, you tried it one way. Try that first phrase of that poem a different way. Jack and Jill went up the hill. It could be bum 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 bum, or it could be bum 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 bum, or whatever. I mean, don't end on Ray, but it could be whatever you want. And just using that poem structure. That's like one way. Or we oftentimes will take and do like a word chain where you're given these set of 6 different words that are food vocabulary. Put them in whatever order you want. Okay, you can play it, move it around, change it. Now take your recorder using B, A, and G, play those words. Play them in the order that you created, or shuffle it around. So it's again, it's scaffolding in a lot of ways. It's not like take recorder and play for 2 minutes. Like, no, I'm going to give you something specific to play, and you get to make choices about that. But even at older grades, it starts with that, like where maybe I'll say like, here's the poem, the rhythm, make your own thing, and then maybe we'll add a C section where I say now you can free using ta, tadi, takadimi, play anything you want as long as it fits this section. But previously they would have done something else where it was like, here's the given rhythm, play that. So it's a lot of like scaffolding and small little millions of examples that build up to something a little bit bigger. And again, with like melodies, it's usually like here are your few pitches you get to do. 5 pitches. You can start wherever, but you must end on do. It's giving those little like, here's the signpost. We're halfway through. You need to get ready to come home. So um, it's it's giving kids choices, but choices within a framework, a scaffold.
Can I ask a fun logistical question? I'm sure you get asked it all the time as an Orff inspired teacher. Are your instruments out all the time? I know Tanya mentioned like hers on carts that she can wheel out and put away. What's your process and like truly how often are you getting on those instruments? Is it almost every lesson or maybe half and half? What's your take on that?
Well, I've not touched them yet this year. So I don't know. I know that there are other teachers who are like, yes, first lesson, we get things out. But for me, I like to spend time doing poems, doing songs, doing movement, getting kids to feel like collaborating, working with each other, and getting the classroom set up before we ever move on to something like an instrument. Because I feel like if you give them too much too fast, then they will fail. So it's a lot of like, how do you work in groups? How do you do it? We're going to do a mixer dance because you got to work with the person next to you, no matter who it is, right? And so a lot of those things right away. So I've not touched them yet, but it's like in the next week or so, it's in my lessons. I have mine on carts. My room is weird because it's the way they built the school. I have a door on every wall. So one door leads to the hallway, one goes straight into the gym, one goes straight into the cafeteria, one goes straight to the stage. So it's like, where would I set up instruments to just like leave them out? Like I can't because I'm like constantly moving or there's a fire code I can't block this way, like there's always something. So I'm lucky that I can like roll them and sort of like park them in a little parking lot. But I teach my kids like early on how to move and do all of that themselves. So I don't feel like I have to um, do that. I once had a principal who said in my evaluation, she was like, this was all great. How can you give students more of the work? Because you're getting all this stuff out for them, you're changing all the bars or whatever. She's like, can you hand some of that off to them? So I've really worked to like in kindergarten teach them how to roll the instrument out. We move it around, we try. They're doing it with partners, and then eventually we'll move to where they're doing it themselves. Or like, how do we take the bar off? Like there's a whole not a full lesson, but like there's a whole moment where we talk about that so that I'm not the one taking off bars or doing that, except for maybe kindergarten and first grade. So giving them a lot of those logistical pieces because I can't do all of that. There's like no way. So, and it speeds things up, and then they love it too because they're like, excited. Like we get to move the instrument, and then we need the stool. Go get the stool. Like they take such ownership of that little thing. But it's like why we have recycling teams and why we have whatever in schools where you're giving them some of that work, and then they feel like, yes, I can do that. I get to move the trash can down the hallway. Yes, you can. Go enjoy it. Thank you. But yeah, like yes, move that instrument out. Like how to do it safely or whatever. So it's some of that giving kids the ownership.
Yeah, that is really important. I have to get over my trigger of when they start wrenching that bar off and the peg. I can just feel the peg bending and yeah, yeah.
Can I show you a little trick really quick just for fun?
Yes,
Please.
please. And this,
Okay,
in
I
case
learned.
you're listening, people, to this podcast, we do have a video version on YouTube, so you can see what David is doing right now because it's always magical.
Okay, so I learned this from Meg Teets, who teaches in Minnesota, and she teaches Orff levels all around the country. She's
She teaches in
wonderful.
Colorado.
In Colorado, right? Yeah,
Yep.
because I knew what school is that? That's is
Metro
it not
State.
Carrie
Metro
just
State? Okay,
did her level 1 this past summer.
with Meg.
No,
Were you with
I
Meg?
did with
Oh, okay.
Karen Petty, who's
Oh
fabulous.
yes.
But Meg teaches level 2. So if and when I go back, which I we'll see. I hope to. I would love to work with Meg. But anyways, side note,
Yeah.
she's fabulous.
Okay, well,
Fabulous.
when Meg teaches kids how to take the bars off, she talks about okay, there's like like a helicopter or like a drone, right? Like going up and down. But kids like maybe remember that. So what she says is, if you look at the bar, in the bar, there's the full bar and then there's a little hole, and usually that's where there's like a little peg, there's a nail that goes through that. That if you didn't have that, you'd hit the bar and it would vibrate and it would fall right off the instrument because as it vibrates, it moves a little bit, so the peg keeps it in place. But the peg is kind of like a nail. So like imagine this pencil is like a nail and just sits on there. So when you hit it, it doesn't move. It doesn't go away. But like the pencil is keeping it in place. This nice pencil. So imagine if you have the bar and you take the bar off the pencil, it comes right off. But if you're not careful and you twist it, then look what happens to the pencil. And so like she does this visual where she on purpose breaks the pencil in front of all the kids, and they all go like, like they gasp, like, "How dare you!" Right? And she's like, "Yeah." And now, but guess what? That was just a pencil. I can sharpen the pencil. I can't do that with the pegs. If you do that to the pegs, they will break. And so forever on, the kids have this visual of they're gonna break off the tip of that pencil, and they've had this traumatic like gasp moment of like, oh my god, this pin, so it just like gives them that visceral like experience to connect, so that they don't break the pin. I
I love
don't have to change pins all that often, and I think it's because of Meg's pencil example.
Great.
that. Love that. So now we are so excited to have David here to share with us a know better, do better strategy or idea. This is our segment where we talk about something culturally responsive teaching. It might be a piece of literature or a new practice or a new idea, anything in that realm. So, David, what would you like to share with us today?
Okay, so I love when you have like heritage months, theme months where you can get kids involved in understanding broader culture and more global view. And so right now it's Hispanic and Latinx Heritage Month, and so for my kids, I try and figure out like how can I integrate this in a way that makes sense for their age group, but also like for my curriculum. And so I don't think it's just like just singing songs in Spanish, because there are some kids where like, yes, that's great, but the language barrier will be a problem, and it slows things down. So like I do some like traditional songs and folk songs and like dances and things like that. But one of my favorite things to do is to bring in books, like children's books, because it like there depending on the book, like there's so many different kinds of books. There are some books that are like illustrations of songs, so like Los Pollitos, or De Colores. They're these really great board books or kid books that I can sing the song and show them a visual, or songs that have like a song attached. Like there's a book called Pelotero Man, which is really fun, about a little kid who wants to get a little ice cream pop, or one called Salsa Lullaby, where it's two parents putting their kid to sleep. And so I can sing the book, I can make that an example that's fun and musical, but it's in the culture. But the more that I find that like I don't have to sing De Colores for it to be like highlighting this culture. Like I can just make sure that I'm sharing a book where the protagonist is highlighting someone from the culture. So like I try and make sure that I have a really good diverse set of books, whether it's for this month or not. But like when I share books, like I always try and make sure it's not just a white kid on the cover, or it's not just one specific culture that I'm highlighting. I try and bring in a good variety. So like for this specific month, there's a book called Miguel and the Grand Harmony, which is a really fun book. Kids love it because it's like kind of a Pixar Coco story, but not. And it's great because my art teacher talks about the artist who does the illustrations. You can bring in books like My Name is Celia, about Celia Cruz, and talk about like great artists, like singers. There's Ricky Martin has a book called Santiago the Dreamer, about who he wants to be in like the school talent show or something and gets rejected. That's a really cool book. So like there are all these books where you can bring in the culture and bring in the story, and just center the culture by just the books that you're reading. It doesn't even have to be overt, like now here I'm reading this because it's this month, but just like making sure that kids see themselves, or if they're not seeing themselves, they're seeing this other culture that you really want to have represented. And it doesn't have to be overt. It can be just like, we're going to read this story, but and I realized there was a year where I had a book on the shelf, and one little girl goes, she looks like me. And we hadn't said anything. It was for a different grade, but just the fact that she was like identifying and then resonating with this girl who was, it looked just like her on the bookshelf, and she just felt this connection. I was like, okay, well, this is important that I make sure that what I'm bringing in is relevant and expands the worldview of my kids.
Love that.
And it's time for a work smarter, not harder. And I feel like, David, you're like the king of the work smarter, not harder. You've already given us several, but do you have another?
Yes. Okay. This one is revolutionized my school, not just me, but my school. So this summer, I taught level one Orff in St. Louis at the University of Missouri St. Louis, and the movement instructor was Jess Dunnick, who is from like Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and she told me about this really cool resource that I now use like daily, and it's called flippity.net, FLIPPITY.net. And you can go in and you take a class roster and you just like copy paste in the names and hit create, and it gives you a choice wheel. So like you can spin the wheel, it'll choose a kid. It will automatically put kids in groups of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can like it's all these different things that you can have the Flippity do for you just by putting in names. So I made a database like a Google Sheets where I did one of these like Flippity boards for each classroom, and I share it with the specials team. So now in every room, if I say we're going to make groups of 2, let me put it up on the board, and it just automatically shuffles them into groups of 2. So instead of kids fighting about who am I going to be with, they are just randomized, put in groups. Sometimes they'll say like, "But I was with this person last time." So I have one of those big foam dies, like dice in my room, and I say, "Okay, well then I roll a die, and it's like 4." So I go to the flippity and I hit shuffle 4 times, and then kids don't fight me on like, "But I was with this person." I was like, "I just shuffled it. You saw. I didn't do it. I didn't do it to the time I wanted to stop. I'm not placing with one kid. It's random, So Flippity has been so great because in like an instant, I can do groups of 2, groups of 3, groups of 4, and I have it bookmarked on my browser, so I can just like boop, and it pulls up K through 2, and I find the class, and there it is in an instant. So instead of like taking forever to like fight about groups, I just put it up, and then I even put the visual on the board, and kids see it, and they're like, oh, and they find their name and do it on their own. So it has cut down so much logistical time and also cut down on fighting and arguing about who's with who because it's random. It's not my choice or your choice, or it's just the computer. So it's been a game changer for me.
And I'm assuming it'll save your classes, right? You can
Yes.
create an account and it saves it and all that.
I don't even do an account. I just do groups of names, and it just saves the group of name
Oh,
together. So you just put it together, and it's flippity.net. And you put it together, and I just like save it and bookmark the kid's name, and it does everything. It'll do a randomizer and name picker, and it does like a million other things. You can make your own bingo, you can make your own board game, all sorts of stuff. But I just use it for the name function.
cool.
Very cool.
So now we're going to share some things that we enjoy. We call this our coda section, and it could be something for in the classroom or out of the classroom. We could go either way. So, Tanya, you want to kick us off? What are you enjoying lately?
Well, David, I do follow you on Instagram, or we follow you as Music Teacher Coffee Talk, and I want to talk candy corn because you were talking about candy corn combinations. Oh, and before off mic, Carrie and I were having a little discussion about the candy corn versus the pumpkins in the autumn mix. And Carrie's a fan of the
I
pumpkins,
love
but
the pumpkins. I like
I,
them better than all the other things.
well, I love candy corn because they're the perfect size. And so when you eat 6 of them, you're like, yeah, but they're so small. If I eat like one pumpkin, I'm like, that's a lot.
Well,
It's like
yeah, one
chewing
or
on a
two pumpkins
marshmallow.
equals 6 candy corns. I mean, there's
Yeah.
got to be some
So,
ratio math going on here.
but that's not even what I wanted to talk about. Yeah. David, you had mentioned like, peanuts and candy corn together, and you had recommended salted almond and candy corn together. But no one has talked about the best combo that's popcorn and candy corn together, which is my fave. So that's what I want to be enjoying is
Can
popcorn
we
and
can we
candy corn.
clarify fresh popped, or are you talking like smart pop? Or are you I mean, like what kind of popcorn are we going for here?
It doesn't even matter. I do like to fresh pop like on the stove occasionally, and that's good. Um, I do like a skinny pop, no flavor, just like straight up skinny pop, as long as it's not been around for a long time. I opened up a bag the other day and it was kind of stale. Anyway, I'm not really picky on the popcorn as long as it's not flavored and not stale. But that with candy corn, I think is like the ultimate. Thoughts?
I mean, I haven't tried it. I think that sounds great. I think I'll have to do some research though,
Of
and
course.
try that today because that sounds delightful.
'Tis the season.
I'm just pro candy corn in almost all instances. So
I agree for sure.
Have you tried the like really weird ones? Like, okay, I listened to My Favorite Murder and they had a whole thing where they were trying all these weird can't like Thanksgiving food flavored candy corns and that kind of stuff. Have you tried that? Like savory versions?
yeah, so this week my as what I shared on Instagram was the assistant principal at my school gave me blackberry cobbler and caramel apple candy corn, and they were okay. I've done some of the weird ones, like the like turkey dinner or
Yeah.
whatever. That's not my favorite, but it's within the genre, so I'll try it. You know, like I may not. It this is great for talking about improvisation. I'll try it. I maybe don't like it. I maybe won't keep it, but I will try it. But yeah, I think some of those oddball flavors. It's like even in the fall mix, I don't like the chocolate ones. So
I
but
like
you know what? It's in
popcorn,
there.
candy corn, and M&Ms together and peanuts. Like create like a whole bowl, like a whole
That's
trail mix
that's
assortment.
too many things going on.
No, 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 it's fabulous.
Okay.
It's great.
Well,
I mean, it's somebody sent me a mix this week that was candy corn, caramel corn, pretzel bites, and raisins. And I was there for everything except the
You
raisins.
lost me at
And not,
raisins for sure.
you lost me at raisins. I was like, that is a trash food. I will just pick that out. But everything else I am totally fine with. It's just the raisins where you lost me. So,
agreed.
This is
Yes.
important, hard hitting news. David,
truly.
what is your coda besides candy corn, besides no raisins? What are you enjoying?
Okay.
Not raisins.
So, um, I got turned on to this thing on Spotify. I'm a Spotify person, where I just use it for everything. I don't know. It's maybe I should find a different option. But there's this thing called I'm trying to get the exact name called New Music Friday. I think it's New Music Friday. And literally every Friday, Spotify will give you it's like 5 hours worth of music that you probably haven't heard of before, and so or maybe you have, or maybe it's a brand new release or whatever. But they every week, yeah, it's called New Music Friday. It's a playlist by Spotify, and so like sometimes I'll find songs that I absolutely love, and sometimes I'll find like songs that I never would have ever explored, or sometimes I'll just like nah skip, you know. But like every week it's different. So if I'm driving in the car to work because I have a kind of a long drive, it's always like fun to like it's something new. It's something I like, and I don't feel bad about skipping because I want to see what else is on this playlist. And I found a lot of songs that like I didn't think I was gonna like that country song, but guess what? I'm gonna save that one for later because I do kind of like that. So it's fun, and I don't have to change it. I don't have to search it. Just every Friday it's different. So it's a fun little exploration.
I have to try that. I'm a Spotify user as well. And I'm the DJ. I use the DJ function a lot, but I'm finding I hear the same 20 songs over and over again.
Yes. Yes. There was one time where Spotify, like, I found a playlist and it was like a genre I was searching for. And I looked at the songs and I was like, I like this one. I like this one. I like this one. This is amazing. And then I was like, oh, the playlist had like made for David Rao. I was like, okay, well, so you're just pulling the songs that I've already listened to.
Yeah.
Well, I really want actual, like, eclectic something different. So
Yes.
this is absolutely not the same.
Awesome. Oh, Carrie,
Oh
what
yeah.
about you?
Well, hey, it's spooky time. So, I decided to read Sherlock Holmes. I've never read Sherlock Holmes, and I decided it was about time. So I read like the very first. I mean, I don't know what you consider the first, but I think it's considered one of his first like stories, novels, whatever you want to call it, Study in Scarlet. And I read that, and it's like part of a collection. So there's more books within the books, but I just found it to be delightful. I don't know. I'm not really good at reading old books, like anything older than like when I was born. So I was like afraid that the text was going to be like old language challenging and I was going to get really bored with it. But I loved it. I found it to be so delightful. And I don't know why I'm surprised by this. I'm sure you already know this, but I just want to say if you're like me and you've never read Sherlock Holmes. It's spooky time, so it's a good time and it's not too scary. So it was a good departure from my my usual, which gets a little gruesome. This was lovely. Have you all read Sherlock Holmes? Am I the only person in the room who's never read Sherlock Holmes?
My son was really into it for a minute, and then I meant to also read it, and I just didn't because Cumberbatch was on, and I'm like, I'd rather watch him.
Well, there's that
So
too. Yeah.
you know,
But I wanted to
This is
actually read it.
like
Like I
doing the
wanted to,
research.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, you got to do thorough research.
yeah, I wanted to
So you
get
can
to the
really enjoy
original.
Benedict's work. Yeah.
Exactly. But yes, you're right. Now that I've seen all of those shows a couple of times, maybe it's time that I read it for reals.
Yeah, it was
And
delightful.
it's like kind of have you read multiple Sherlock Holmes books or
I've
just the
just
one?
read the one so far, so I've just started.
I feel like people who've maybe I'm wrong on this, but like they enjoy it because it's like kind of formulaic. Like it's like every time there's a new mystery, and so like by the end of the book, like we're gonna put a bow on this. So it's like nice that like yes, it is. It's instead of like getting a book where you're like this is so good, and you're like it's a trilogy. I have to read all the books. Like you can enjoy a Sherlock Holmes book and then be like, I'm going to set it off for a while instead of being like, where are the other two books? Because that's what I get into is I really enjoy a book and then about 20 pages from the end, I realize this is not going to be over. I'm going to have to find the other books.
Yeah, that's true. No, these are short reads and they're fun and it's just fun to like see what his character was from the beginning. He's a quirky fellow and so it's just really fun to see all that how it develops. So, that's a good time. Well, before we say goodbye to David, we want to say thank you again for being here. It was such a delight to chat with you.
Yeah, it was so
Yes.
much fun to talk.
Can you remind our listeners where can they find you in all the things that you do because you do so much?
Well, if you go to my blog, it's makemomentsmatter.org. You can find links to everything, but I'm on like Instagram and Facebook. If you search for my name or Make Moments Matter, you should be able to find it.
Yes. And don't forget that David, does a every Monday broadcast on Instagram and Facebook. And I love that you just give us some very specifics like this is what I'm doing with this grade this week. And I have to tell you, I often when we have new teachers in our district who are like kind of frantic about like, oh my, I didn't realize I would have to like create all these lessons. I mean, I understand. I always say, if I was brand new and I wanted specific things like that I could just plug and play, like I could go into my room tomorrow and do, I'd be watching David every week and taking those things and taking them into the classroom. I think it's just a wonderful service that you do for music teachers.
Oh, thank you. It's fun to share that stuff. And sometimes I share and I'm like, this didn't work. And here's why I think it didn't work. But
And
it's
that's
just
good
fun to
too.
like chat through and talk about some of those things and share ideas.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for everything, David. We appreciated chatting with you today.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We've reached the double bar line. Thank you for listening to Music Teacher Coffee Talk. Show notes can be found at musicteachercoffeetalkpodcast.com. You can connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. Just look for Music Teacher Coffee Talk.
If you enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving us a review on iTunes to help others find this podcast. And we always appreciate folks buying us a coffee, so look for that link on our show notes and on our Facebook page. Until next time, this is Tanya.
And this is Carrie wishing you happy musicking.